call it whatever you want. But I got another question for you. Since tariffs are taxes, as you say, and taxes get passed on to the end user, are you willing to admit that when people like Bernie Sanders or most of the Democrats come out and say these corporations need to start paying their fair share, we got to tax the living piss out of them, we got to raise the corporate tax rate, are you willing to admit then that that gets passed on to the consumer?
I was tagged in that video several times asking me if the claim that this man makes in his video is true. If we were to raise the corporate tax rate, would those taxes be passed on to consumers like we see with tariffs? There are actually quite a few economic studies that look at the impact of raising corporate taxes on consumers. And I think what the original video fails to realize is that there is a lot of nuance when we're talking about this. It's also just important for us to look at how corporate taxes don't just affect all people in the US, but maybe they affect different groups of people based on how much money you make, how old you are, differently than others. So this study looks at how increases to the corporate tax rate affect the prices that consumers pay. And this paper finds that when you increase corporate taxes by 1%, it leads to an increase in product prices by 0.24%. In fact, approximately half of the corporate tax incidence ends up falling on consumers through this increase in prices. Now, this man will probably stop my video right here and say, see, I have the right answer. I owned all of you people. This economist agrees with me. However, I think it's important when we're talking about economic studies that we look into exactly where these price increases are mostly happening. What this paper does is it looks at where these price increases are primarily happening in what types of markets. So it's looking at the product prices of around 125 goods, think eggs, bread, and it looks at how competitive those markets are, and the corporate tax rate increases. The price increases tend to come from markets that are not competitive markets. So essentially, when you have markets that are anti-competitive, corporate monopolies, etc., that is where the price increases are primarily happening. And so you can address some of the increases from these corporate taxes by making markets more competitive, breaking up monopolies, etc. Second thing I want to talk about is how corporate taxes affect people with different incomes differently, right? So we can assume that these price increases are happening to both billionaires as well as poor people all the same. However, that's not necessarily true from what we see in the data. This paper looks at how corporate taxes affect income inequality. Namely, do corporate taxes affect richer people or poor people differently? What it finds is that when you cut corporate taxes, yes, both richer people and poor people benefit. However, richer people benefit exceedingly more than poor people. This paper does the same thing and looks at the effect of corporate tax